Ooh, I'm wearing a color. I know, it's shocking to me too. Hey guys, it's Sam, and this is my spoiler-free review of When the Moon Was Ours by Anne-Marie McLemore. This is a YA magical realism story that follows two main characters in a small town. Miel is a girl that was found when a water tower was emptied, so she kind of came from the water, and she has roses that grow out of her wrists. And Sam is her best friend, and he creates moons. They both kind of get tied up in the plans of the Bonner sisters, who are kind of this magical group of 4 sisters who have the power over the boys in the community who kind of ruin them in a way and are kind of magical themselves. People think of them as witches, and this is really a story of that, but also of the main characters finding themselves and learning things about themselves and learning things about each other. And it's a book that's very hard to explain, mostly because it's a magical realism story. I think those books tend to have synopses that are just don't fully encapsulate what the book's about, because it's a book that you just kind of have to take a journey with. So let me just get into the review. So first off, let me get into the world building. As this is a magical realism story, this is our contemporary world, but it has magic in it. And the magic in it, the main characters don't really think anything of. The characters around them don't really think anything of. So very eccentric, weird things are happening, and no one really finds it that unusual. So that element is cool. It leaves this unique atmosphere that is really hard to find in any other story. This only reminds me of other magical realism stories that I've read because this genre is so unique, and there's no other genre that really evokes this kind of imagery and emotion and the way that the writing is and everything like that. So there's so many things about this that are just so magical feeling. The whole book just kind of feels like late autumn when anything could happen, and it does in this book. Pumpkins turn to glass, and little girls are found in water towers, and their skirts never completely dry. And boys make actual glowing moons out of art, and there's just all of these things that happen in this world, and it makes sense, and the characters just go with it, and it's this atmosphere thing that you have to feel with magical realism stories, and that's exactly how this was. Next, let me talk about our characters. Our 2 main characters are people of color, and there are also 2 trans characters in here as well that are main characters. One being one of the main characters, Sam, and the other one being a side character. So there's a lot of diversity in this story, and that is a focus as well. There's a lot of cultural focus between these 2 main characters and their cultures and their background and how that affects a lot of the things about their identity. But beyond that, this is just a romantic tale of these 2 characters. These 2 people that have grown up and been best friends and know a lot about one another but don't know everything because they themselves don't know everything about themselves. It's really beautiful and poignant, and there is this whole plot with these other girls, these kinds of magical Bonner sisters, and they even have this magical sense to them, and that is not even the main point of it. I would say the main point of it is the relationship between these 2 characters and finding themselves in their own identities. But even those girls have this the atmosphere that these girls add, and the feeling that they're real. It feels like I don't know, it's a spin on that kind of almost Virgin Suicides type story, girls, these magical girls, but in a world where they are actually kind of magical, but they still all feel real. They still all have these very eccentric, unique things that they do that are magical, but they feel very much like real people, and you feel for them, and everything about them pulls at your heartstrings. This is not a very long book at all, but you get very attached to these characters and what they're going through, and you just live that with them. Even though this world is so weird and not like our own, it's still the emotion of these characters still really hits you, which sometimes that can get lost in magical realism stories. Lastly, we talk about the plot, and with the plot I'm mostly going to talk about the writing in here. So again, this is a very distinct type of writing style that is just unique to magical realism stories. It's flowery writing, but it's not overly flowery, because for magical realism you kind of have to have this type of writing. If you're used to these kinds of stories, you'll know what I mean, but this is beautifully written. There's just so many lines that are just so stunning. If you haven't read magical realism before, I encourage you to try it. It's just a different, that's how you get the atmosphere, that's how you get the emotions, just this very poetic, atmospheric, visual writing style where you're is this a metaphor? Is this happening? Like, it's beautiful, and there's no way to quite explain it. I just find reviewing magical realism books to be difficult because these books are so difficult to kind of pin down. I think everyone has a unique experience with every book that they read, but just specifically with magical realism, I think that's even more true and even more pronounced because of all of these reasons. But I enjoyed the plot because there kind of wasn't this set, like, adventure action-y type plot. There wasn't this, even in contemporary stories, you know, you have this kind of plot that you kind of know where it's going and everything, and with these kinds of stories that are contemporary with magical realism, you don't really know where it's going. It kind of meanders and it flows beautifully instead of being like this rushed thing with any kind of like drama or anything. There is that element of suspense in here, but it feels different. It feels slower and sweeter. I just really love magical realism stories, if you can't tell. So overall, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. So comment down below and let me know what you thought of When the Moon Was Ours. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye!